I'm going to start this. This is always the most awkward part of the show when we all try to figure out if we're actually live. But I think we're live. But I'm going to wait for you guys to confirm.
Here,
As I
I'll
say,
look
good
at it on
evening
my
to
phone.
everybody. Welcome to a Narrative Live special report. I've been looking forward to tonight for a long time, and especially having these three heavyweights here. I can hear myself now. So something must be working.
Okay. I just saw you go live.
Why can I
You just
hear
went live.
myself is my question. Let me just do that.
I think no, that's just I think just you went live.
1 second. Let me just
You're
sort
only-
this out before I go. Really?
No,
Did you guys-
I can see you. I can see you on Substack.
On your Substack? Okay, good.
Can
Yeah,
you
I
see
can
yourself?
see you.
Okay, good. That's
I
progress.
think I just went live.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a progress too.
Oh, There's a delay.
I think I'm not sure.
I think you are. I hope so. I can't see
How's
yours.
that?
Can you see any? I can only see Zev.
Well, let me double
I
check
can see
this.
everybody.
All right, let's see.
While Zev's checking, I just want to say, "Hi guys."
Yes.
Technical issues, but the good part about it, in the meantime, he smashed those hearts. Let's get as many people on there as possible. Keep smashing them. We got an incredible show for you guys. With incredible information, incredible cast of investigative journalists. I don't even know how I got myself with some of these great people here. I guess because I used to be one of these guys, but and they used to investigate me, all of these people. So we're gonna have some fun today. go into a lot of the stuff, but a lot of important stuff, because the one thing that we talk about, all of us, and we'll always talk about, and we'll keep talking about until there's accountability, until there's justice, and that's the Epstein files. So today is a special. We're gonna go into a lot of it, and a lot of it having to do with financial.
Awesome, Lev. I love the way you set that up. And you're here because you know so much about the people involved in this network of people. And what triggered tonight's big special, it's titled "What Everyone Is Missing About Epstein," is the financial crimes. Really, what we are beginning to uncover, and I've been doing this in my new series, The Greatest Heist Book 2, now reaching chapter 8. So we've really got into some nitty-gritty, where I explain how $6.7 billion was repaid to Jeffrey Epstein and his network of friends by the Fed, we believe, by the way, taxpayers' money, if we're correct about that, at the time when the entire economy was crashing. If you remember back to 2008, Bear Stearns collapsed, then Lehman Brothers collapsed. As Bear Stearns was collapsing, they got bailed out by JP Morgan, the bank, JP Morgan. And in that process of getting bailed out, along with the Treasury's help, only liquid funding, which was an offshore holding created by Jeffrey Epstein, only that offshore holding was saved and got paid back in full, $6.7 billion, while America lost their homes, while Americans lost their dreams, while, we'd find out later the stock market crashed completely. These people were able to walk away at par on their investment. And there's very little known about liquid funding and why it existed. But the reason we think it existed is because it felt to us like a vault, a place that they could squirrel away the assets they wanted to protect. And then, by intentionally crashing Bear Stearns and intentionally having people in place to buy Bear Stearns inside JP Morgan, they were able to control getting the payout, getting the Treasury to pay it out, and also making sure that all these assets were controlled by JP Morgan. And the reason why we're so fixated about this transaction is because Jeffrey Epstein was also very, very close to Jess Staley, who was a very senior executive at JP Morgan. And also, he was very close to Jamie Dimon, although Jamie Dimon claims that he never met him. It just can't be true that he never met him. They had too many transactions to possibly have never met. In fact, I think that they met all the way back when Wexner and Epstein and Staley and Dimon coincided in Ohio with Leslie Wexner, some people call him the godfather of all of this, but we'll find out when he testifies soon. So with that in mind, I'm so thrilled to have Ellie Leonard, Lev Parnas, and Kate Justice here. Everyone knows Ellie by now. She's becoming an extraordinary figure in the investigations of Jeffrey Epstein and someone who's looked at these files incredibly closely. We know each other way too well. We're sharing chats way too late at night about a whole bunch of things. But and you come up with something really fascinating tonight, which we're going to touch on, which is this mystery email that was sent by Jeffrey Epstein, which appears to be dictating his plea bargain or plea deal to Alex Acosta. So we're going to get to that as well. Lev Parnas, everybody knows as well, extraordinary insider who's turned good and is now busy telling us exactly what was going on inside this extraordinary network. And Kate Justice might be new to everyone, but also doing some impressive work on the Epstein investigation. Tonight, she was forwarding around this email that was all about how Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary, is connected to Ehud Barak and also connected to Jeffrey Epstein, and maybe a reason why he's burying the Epstein files. Everyone was in the loop, says Lev Parnas. That's a great T-shirt. Well, do you want to kick us off, Lev? Talk a little bit more about what that T-shirt is all about and why you think, why we know everyone was in the loop.
Well, it's interesting. It's the T-shirt started off back in 2019 when 2020 when I did my interview with Rachel Maddow, and that was the very first time everybody really got to hear and understand that Donald Trump, AG Barr, and everybody was in the loop. Vice President Pence. I mean, everybody was aware of the pressure campaign that we were doing on Zelensky at the time. Well, I thought it was important to bring it out now because we're seeing the same thing with the Epstein files. You're starting to see a pattern. We were just talking offline a little bit here with Kate and Ellie and Zev before we jumped in about how everywhere you turn and how everywhere you look, you're seeing the pattern of certain individuals, certain powerful players in certain countries, like Ehud Barak in Israel, like the Russian oligarchs, which were Vexelberg and others lead directly to Putin, and obviously here in the United States, it came the point of origin was Epstein, but Epstein was like a source to many different people that we're trying to get an understanding to. And I think what Zev is talking about, I think this is extremely important because usually we're concentrating on, and which is I think extremely important, is the victims, is the survivors, and to try to get justice for them, to try to get accountability to those perverts and to those pedophilia, inhumane individuals. But we also talk about there has to be strategic ways of also getting these people, because not only were these people some of the most horrible people when the things they did to these young girls and to these young children and women, but also how they controlled our world markets, how a lot of people that don't know, I mean, how these people were involved in certain, like in 2008 when we had the downfall, the crash with the a mortgage market, when we had other situations, and how they made money on it. You're seeing little twirts of it because Donald Trump is doing everything in the open now, where he comes out and says, "Hey, I'm going to announce today's a good day to buy because I'm going to announce tariffs." At 9:00 in the morning, and then the market rushes, and you see him playing all of these games. But I think what Zev's gonna, and these incredible investigative journalists like Zev, Ellie, Kate are going to talk about, and I'm also excited to hear some of these people involved and see what I could add from my side and from my inside school, in knowing some of these people, how it all blends together. But I really believe that there's a lot over here having to do with international, not only espionage, not only the child pedophilia and the sex trafficking, but global control of money, and which has ties into everything else.
It's such a valid point you're making there, and it's so important that everyone understand that this is a vast network, that everyone was in the loop. But one of the people that I think was also in the loop, and the other thing you mentioned there, Lev, which I think is so profound, is a lot of people made money as the market was crashing in 2008. One of those people who seemed to make a lot of money in 2008 was Donald Trump. His empire went from in the 90s from being in debt to about $1 billion, $900 million in debt. And by the end of the 2000s, he was worth $1.5 billion. That's $2.5 billion more than he was worth in the 90s after this huge downturn. Now, this is he could be a very lucky investor. He could just be a very smart guy who's just invested in all these really smart things. But that's an infinite improvement on his financial system, on his financial scale. And he'd done it also several times in his career. He was the bankruptcy king, able to get himself bankrupt and then bounce back even richer on the other side of that by utilizing the bailout, by writing off debt, by restructuring things. Now, some might call that just smart accounting. Some might also call it what some people have said to me it is control fraud, where you basically have executives of companies that are busy tanking the companies that they're working on by extracting as much debt as they can, or getting as much debt as they can into the companies, and then extracting all that for themselves when the bankruptcy happens. And it's a specific kind of fraud. It's a different kind of fraud. But it seems to fit into exactly this pattern that Donald Trump made himself wealthy off. And it's a thing that Jeffrey Epstein was a real specialist on. He knew how to dodge taxes, how to avoid these payments, how to make money out of nothing. And he certainly knew how to collapse companies. We know that he collapsed Towers Financial with Stephen Hoffenberg, and we know exactly how that went down, and that's how it happened. So, any of you want to chime in on any of those, and then,
yeah. If I could just make quickly before I just pass it on. A lot of people don't realize that there's more money made in this country on collapsing companies, destroying companies, betting on the down, just as it is going up. And a lot of people don't understand that unless you're astute investors. Most people think, oh, if the market's going down, everybody's losing money. No, folks, it's the regular people. You're losing money. Most of the powerful, they're the ones making money, and that's why usually when I used to be in the stock market, the first thing they told me is when they tell you on TV to buy, you sell. When they say buy, you, because they're the ones getting liquid on the money. So I've learned that. But Donald Trump, it's not coincidence what you're saying, Zev, and I think we're going to hear a lot about it today because a lot of it has to do with strategical players that came into Donald's life at the time and gave him these lifelines, as you may call them.
To that
And again,
point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one thing Zev had said
please.
about him being lucky was I believe during that whole financial collapse in 2008 is when Trump had sold that mansion in Palm Beach at like a record profit. I mean, it was, and no one else could even sell a house. And he sold it at a profit, and it was,
to the Russian oligarch.
Yes.
Yep.
That's actually a very interesting payment. Point. Yeah, I call it a payment now because the more I look at that, I think he was paid off by the Russians for something. Whether he was paid off for his helping collapsing the 2008 crash is who knows if that's the reason he got paid off. But the timing is so fascinating to me that when it happened was right after the 2008 crash. And who also got richer during this period of time, during this 2008 crash, was Jeffrey Epstein, became $100 million richer. Ghislaine Maxwell became, I think, about $7 million richer. A whole bunch of people just suddenly amassed wealth in the months after the collapse of 2008, which is not the story of most Americans. Most Americans were experiencing the exact opposite. They were losing their homes. Mortgages were collapsing. The market was uncertain. But somehow these people were making money in this environment. Mm-hmm. And, it suggests some sort of insider knowledge. Ellie, you've tracked this network a lot, this group of people. Yes. Does any of this strike a chord with you that there's a financial network here as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm finding little kind of nuggets as I'm going through the files lately. I was just looking on my Substack. There's something called the Southern Country International Limited, which is a bank that he created offshore that continued to receive payments after he was dead, and these like multi-million-dollar payments in this offshore bank that he had created. And nobody knew why those payments were continuing to be moved offshore, even after he died. The assumption is that he was trying to make his money unreachable by probably some of the survivors. But also what you and I were looking at earlier this week was this arrest in 1993 for like stealing Department of Treasury checks and mail fraud, and then how he was so wrapped up in, even in late in life, he was meeting with the Department of Treasury. And it's like, why is this rando from New York City meeting with the Department of Treasury to make decisions, and then talking about like the Chinese global market and like all the financial markets, and telling the, I think it was the vice president of the Chinese financial, I don't remember what it was, but he was telling him how to get a loan from the US and like what's the best way to go about it. And I just thought, why are all these people looking to this guy to make these really, really big decisions? And I just think it started small and it just really, really, really built up.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying about that, that's a very early crime that you found this week, which I hadn't really, I mean, we'd known about, but I didn't pay attention to. But it's such an important find in terms of understanding that he had a career in financial crime. This was not something that Jeffrey Epstein did as a side job. This was the job, was financial criminal activity. And I remember Steve Hoffenberg saying that to me, that, if Epstein was involved, there was this financial crime involved. He says there was no other reason to have him involved in anything. And so it's interesting that the network he had, and especially the network inside JP Morgan, was so interesting because, he developed relationships with these executives where, some of them, even Jess Staley, would call him boss. Jess Staley was the head of private banking or something like that. And he was calling Jeffrey Epstein for advice on everything and calling him boss. Yeah, and as you point out, Ellie, he even consulted on the 2008 crash from jail, from his house arrest. He was consulting with them while under house arrest, which is stunning.
Jez Staley is like, don't tell anyone that I came and gave you a hug. Like their relationship got very odd and so far over the line of a business financial relationship. They were clearly very, very close in later years. And during his house arrest, he wasn't supposed to leave the house, and Jez Staley was going to visit him. And they were going places, they were leaving the house. He was breaking all the rules, and they were just like, oh, let's not get caught. It was just very, I don't know. I always say that when you read these emails between like Jez Staley or like Larry Summers, they just feel so Dear Diary. They don't feel like a couple of guys at a bank. They feel very much like, riding home from summer camp. It's very, very odd.
That's so interesting. It's Bear Stearns that is where Jeffrey Epstein started his career. Was at Bear Stearns, is where he got into some financial crimes trouble at Bear Stearns. That's why he left so quickly. And Bear Stearns was also the broker of choice for Donald Trump and Robert Maxwell. So, that's one company that was the first to trigger the collapse of 2008 that was triggered by Jeffrey Epstein. Bear Stearns.
Ace Greenberg.
Ace Greenberg, right.
I know Ace very well. I mean, I'll tell you a little Ace Greenberg story. Yeah. So I'm 16 years old, or I'm 15 years old, and I'm selling the Daily News, New York Post, and me and my cousin are selling it. And there's this one guy I keep calling nonstop, doing this pitch to sell him the newspaper, 25-cent newspaper. This guy wouldn't buy it no matter what. I'd pitch him, he'd never buy it. Finally, I left to do whatever I was doing. My cousin stayed behind. I gave him the phone number. My cousin calls him. This was like after 6 months of me pitching him. Calls him up and he goes, listen, kid, you've been doing good, because he thought my cousin was me. He goes, come in, I'll give you a real job. It was Ace Greenberg, and my cousin ended up working for Bear Stearns. That's how I got on Wall Street, basically. So it's an interesting, just when you mentioned Ace Greenberg, but he was a player. Ace was definitely a player, and Ace was definitely somebody that looked the other way and would play. Bear Stearns was on the same. They weren't on the same as the Merrill Lynch's at that time, but they definitely they were a major powerhouse, especially with bulletin boards, pink sheet stocks, a lot of these unregulated stocks and bonds also.
Also, these mortgage-backed securities, right? I mean, this is what Donald Trump built his empire on, was on Al giving him all these mortgage-backed securities. No one wanted to bank with Donald Trump through the 90s and 2000s because they'd all lose their shirt. But the one person who would agree to keep doing it was Greenberg at Bear Stearns. And there's always a big question mark about why. Why keep throwing all this money at Donald Trump? And one of the answers may be that it was being pulled in by Jeffrey Epstein into liquid funding. And this is why liquid funding is one of those things that I think we really need to ask Congress to explore in a more deeper way. I think that there's a lot of interesting information that just we don't know entirely. We're guessing a little bit around the edgework of why liquid funding was what it was. But the fact that there's so much secrecy there makes it so important.
Also, just to add, at that time, I mean, what time frame are we talking about?
2000 and
What year?
it started in 2001. Jeffrey Epstein chaired it till
2001.
2007.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, so I already was out because I was not even, but I remember there was a certain point in time towards from when because we got into the market, it was 91, 93, 94, 95. Between 95 and 2001, 2002, when I got out, there was a major Bear Stearns and Russia relationship going on at that
Oh, yeah?
time also.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yes,
Well, that
yes,
makes a lot of sense.
that you need to look into, absolutely. Because you know who had an
Hmm.
I'm not gonna, don't quote me, but
Okay.
do me a favor. You guys take a look, because if I might be wrong on this one, but take a look at Mogilevich, and take a look
Mogilevich.
at Mogilevich, and I'll get you another name. Take a look at Bear Stearns at that time, because they were running deals, because that was a very big penny stock time frame where it was a lot, the mob on Wall Street. There was a lot of Italians, a lot of these companies, and Bear Stearns was considered a top tier firm, but they were still there, allowed a lot of things to go under the radar.
It's so interesting. Mogilevich, of course, was tied into Robert Maxwell. They were business partners way back when. And so if Robert Maxwell was a customer of Bear Stearns, that connection might be right there for us to see. And it's interesting, of course, the empire that we think that Robert Maxwell's empire landed up in Jeffrey Epstein's and Ghislaine Maxwell's universe. Ellie, your reaction to some of that stuff, to Bear Stearns and this growing profitability of Donald Trump, what do you think the relationship between Trump and Epstein was really all about?
I think it was about money. I mean, obviously it was very money based. I think they're very, at least on that level, they were very similar, and that competitive, the only thing that Epstein was really, really, really transparent about talking about Trump and his emails was about that last deal with Maison de l'Amitié in Palm Beach, and how when Trump bought it, or when he went behind his back and he, bid more money after they had talked about it, he bid an amount of money that Epstein knew he didn't actually have. And so he talked a lot about, some of the corruption behind bidding and buying a house with money you don't have, and then doubling the price and then giving it back to Russia. So he was very much on the same page that was probably a Russian deal the whole time. But then he also brought up some of the electrical union stuff that was going on there, that he said was more like mob-based electrical union stuff going on with that deal. Something that I find really interesting. Lots of tax evasion. Yeah. Something that I find really interesting that I always look into whenever there's somebody new who pops into this story, I just look into it. The Bear Stearns thread really hasn't stopped. If you look at all the people who have bought properties after Epstein died, there's a lot of Bear Stearns employees. Like the man who bought the island was a Bear Stearns employee. There's a very big thread there that I don't, because I looked into it, I thought, oh, maybe I can email these people or talk to these people and just see what it's like. Why would you purchase this property? And then when I started to see Bear Stearns everywhere, I was like, yeah, no, I don't think I want to email these people. But I don't think it was uncorrupt in that process either. And I don't think whatever happened with, I'm looking at all these things where Ghislaine Maxwell created a trust right before she went to prison, and she moved all her money offshore. Epstein created a bank offshore. He moved all his money offshore. There's somebody still in control of all of that, and I don't know who it is, but this story hasn't stopped. We're not investigating a story that's over. We're investigating a story that's continuing.
And to that point, there is Zorro Ranch. That was purchased by a shell company that was formed months before the purchase of the property that was never searched.
Yeah, that was
So
always a
annoying.
mystery.
And we have no idea who it is. We don't know because it's a shell company.
And we don't know what went on in Zorro Ranch, really. We have some eyewitnesses and victims' testimony about what happened at that ranch, but we don't really have an investigation. And because Governor Richardson, some suspect may have had an influence over that. And of course, Governor Richardson was a part of that, of the Epstein network, and a big, a suspect in a lot of these crimes as well. Kate, talk a little bit more about what your discovery this week about Scott Bessent, because I think it's so interesting that the Treasury Secretary is the person the current Treasury Secretary of Donald Trump is the person who could be releasing all these Treasury files about Jeffrey Epstein, and he continues to sit on them. And would you
he refuses?
He refuses, yeah.
He refuses to release them.
Yeah. And you found out this week, or through someone else's reporting, you've reported this week that there is a reality that he was involved with Epstein in a business deal that tied him to Ehud Barak. This is the current Treasury Secretary involved in an Epstein business deal. That is a remarkable claim.
Yeah. So what I learned, and I think his name was Jack Paulson. I think that's who the original investigator was, that I found his report. So go read his. He really did a good job explaining it. But just kind of a quick summary of it. Bessent was overseeing the Soros Foundation. I'm not sure what his official role was, but he was overseeing money there. And Barak had a consulting agreement with them. So he was paid. Did I lose you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you.
Froze on
No,
my
okay.
Okay. But he was paid by the Soros Foundation. And then hold on, I lost my thought for a second.
I think it was he was worked there as the CEO, the managing director of Soros, and then he also started this investigative firm in New York. There was sort of like a intelligence agency, a private intelligence agency called Ergo.
Yeah. Yep. And he I forgot what the point I was going to make, but yes, he had this consulting agreement. And one of the points that I thought was really interesting is Barak had at that same time formed a new company called Ergo. And this was how he had his payments go through. And Bessent, like I said, was overseeing these payments at that time. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but that's what it was. So Ergo became the general partner of another company called Sum that was also Barak's. And Sum received Epstein's Southern Trust investment. So there's overlap there that I'm starting to work through, because I had started to kind of divert, because Ellie's been really diving into like all of the Epstein files. And so I started looking into some of the leaked emails. Barak was hacked at some point, his Gmail, and pieces of it leaked out. But I think in August they had released kind of like the whole trove of emails. So I downloaded it and I've been going through. So I've been finding a lot of these actual like business proposals and pitch decks and things that are kind of these pieces that we're talking about. And so it's starting to make sense, but I haven't.
Some was really interesting. Some ended up being it was paid for by Wexner. Wexner paid $1 million gave Ehud Barak $1 million to invest in this Israeli intelligence firm called Carbon at the time. Or it was called something else before. It was called Reporty before.
Reporty.
And then it became Carbon. Spelled with a Y-N-E. And that whole thing was an intelligence front, clearly, for the Israelis. It was just, you didn't have to look very far. It was basically run out of the 8200 division in Israel. But it was one of the first times, way back when, in 2019, when I connected Epstein to Israel, it was through Carbon. It was one of the things that really tipped me off, because why was he in partnership with Ehud Barak and Vexelberg and Peter Thiel in this 8200 front company called Carbon? It just was, that's an unusual mix. And one of the other people there was connected to Eric Prince. So it was just one of these phenomenally interesting
and
companies.
also we've seen in the Epstein drop, we've seen Peter Thiel's name being dropped. We know, so Epstein had a connection to Peter Thiel. We know Vexelberg. The interesting part that we're not seeing in the Epstein drops is names like Vexelberg. We're not seeing any Russian oligarchy connection, which we know is impossible, and that's why
Yep.
it is another part of the scrubbing, because it's impossible that in all
Well,
of these
yeah.
drops we haven't seen really. The only connection we've seen is when he's talking to the ambassador or ex-ambassador, telling him about his relationship with the former ambassador from Russia. But we don't have actual, because we definitely know that there was a lot of young Eastern European Russian girls that were being sent over from different ways, from trafficking to being sent over as spies or whatever you want to call it. None of, we're seeing very little of that. We know the people that ran all of that, and we know these are the same, the Vexelbergs and others, the Rabinoviches and other the names that ran in those circles. These are all Putin aligned, and you're not seeing anything of that in the Epstein file. It's just impossible. I mean, unless you tell me,
Well, I agree with that, because and then I think it's just going to be like a percentage of, like, as we're in the very beginnings of these files, which we keep saying 2%, but it's like 2% of a mythical number, so maybe it's not 2%. We don't really know. We're going to see the best of Trump's best at the beginning. He's going to give us the things that benefit him the most, and that's why he's resistant at the stuff at the other end. But the area that you will see the most of that I have found is probably in the U.S. Virgin Islands versus JP Morgan Chase. That case talks a lot about all the umbrella oversight stuff that they were supposed to be doing at JP Morgan, and how Epstein ended up with something like 134 different bank accounts, and they were mostly in the name of these young Eastern European girls whose birthdays were not on the accounts, whose social security numbers or any sort of identifying information was not on the accounts other than their names, and they did not have to be in the room to open the accounts. Epstein went by himself to open these accounts. And likely what those accounts were for, because he was not paying the girls through a bank account because he knew that would be a paper trail. He took out cash to pay all the girls. But likely when you had all these girls from Eastern Europe, he was using their bank accounts to send money back and forth to whatever country they came from. So that was, it was a double-edged sword. It was a benefit to him. He was doing the sex trafficking thing, but it also benefited him with this whole racketeering stuff that was going on that went right back to whatever country they came from.
Right, that's so interesting that the human trafficking network was also a financial crimes network. They were able to move money back and forth. And as you point out, JP Morgan knew he was a pedophile, knew he was a convicted sex criminal. They didn't report any of the big concerns they had around him until his arrest in 2019. That's how long, it was 2019. I think so, yeah.
2019.
So, it's stunning to me that they held on to that information for so long, even knowing this. Ellie, do you think the other thing that you found out this week, which I thought is just really the kind of thing only you would be able to spot, is through, because the work you do, and it's extraordinarily detailed, but you were able to figure out that an email that was written by Jeffrey Epstein was written by Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't actually have I do have the email here. So let me see if I can pull it up. And then
I can describe it.
Yeah. So let me see if I can do.
You're like,
it was actually not even an email. It was a printed letter that was on the floor of his New York townhouse on one of his Persian rugs.
Yeah, let me see if I can make this bigger and more effective.
There you go. Yeah. See, it's very hard to see. I tried to change
bigger,
the coloring. But here's the deal. Part of transcription, which is what I do as my side hustle, is transcribing documents that are hard to read. So I went through and I kind of clarified this picture, and I went through and I typed it up. So I have the actual what's written on a different document. I didn't have to guess anywhere. I could see it very well. And this is a letter that isn't signed by anybody, but it is written to Alex Acosta to talk to him about changing the terms of the plea deal. And originally the plea deal, when he was arrested in 2006 and he went to trial in 2008, he had, I think Maria Villafana was the original lead prosecutor, and she had 60 indictments, and she was bringing 60 indictments against him. And so he was going to plea And then we all know that when he finally did plea, there was only 2 indictments. He got a really lame jail sentence. He got to leave the jail for 12 hours a day. He went on his merry way and still was philandering and raping girls and, sending money to other countries. Like, he was still doing all the things he was doing while he had a 13-month jail sentence. And so this letter is a document that is trying to discredit Maria Villafana for leaking information to the New York Times. It involves Ken Starr, who was very cozy with Jeffrey Epstein. I have feelings about what Ken Starr thought that relationship was. But the interesting thing about this letter, because it is unsigned and because it is to Alex Acosta, I was able to determine, based on descriptions of articles and letters from Ken Starr, roughly like a 2-week time period that this would have been written, which was within the month before he pled out in 2008. But also, this letter is supposed to be written from his legal team to Alex Acosta to change the terms of his plea deal. But when I read it, and having transcribed all of his emails, however many thousands of emails have been in these files so far, I knew that Jeffrey Epstein had actually written this. It wasn't his legal team at all. He spoke about himself in the third person. He was trying to be convincing that he was a legal team, but he has tells with his writing and the way he uses punctuation, the way he spells things. And these are things that I've seen over and over again, to the point where I could look at it and say this was obviously written by Jeffrey Epstein. And
So
I
what are the clues here? In this email here, what are the clues that tell you?
You can't really see that very well.
Okay.
So but the clues are, it's just like he does a lot of double commas. He'll just put in random punctuation. He'll use a quotation mark instead of a comma. He'll use a dash. He'll use he never capitalizes. Yeah, lots of spaces and then another period and then another comma. I mean, just very, I don't know if he was dyslexic or if he was just in a hurry, but this pretty much explains, and this is one of these emails that he was sending himself. This is a notes email. This is something he would have sent himself to remember things.
Yeah, it's a good email too.
Interesting the names on there.
Isn't that interesting?
Right?
Yeah, Sergei Churkin, Khashoggi.
Yes.
Jess Staley's there.
Chomsky, Komsky.
So this is a week before he got arrested. This is a week before his arrest at Teterboro, and he's writing these names to talk with Bannon about, because at this point they were emailing all day, every day. So this was a reminder of things to discuss with Bannon, because they were still talking about making a documentary, and he wanted to go over all of this stuff. But because I've typed up a lot of these emails, I knew that letter on his floor was written by him and not written by his legal team. Now, within the next month, the terms of his plea deal were completely changed. They were eradicated. Maria Villafana was discredited, and we all know the story of the sweetheart deal. And so I am now in the process of trying to figure out if that letter was sent, who it was sent to, and did it have an effect on the terms of his deal? Because if it did, that's pretty groundbreaking. That would put the whole case in jeopardy. It would have put Alex Acosta in jeopardy, because he's asking him in this letter, he's saying, I know you're going to have to explain it to everyone why you changed the terms of the plea deal to something so lame, basically, but it will benefit you and it will benefit us, and it's the best thing for the survivors. And that's,
this is an extraordinary find, and it really puts
incredible.
It puts us into a real framework of what happened at that time, because that particular date that you circled around, May 19th, 2008, which was a very busy time in the prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. And I'll go through some additional documents, but go ahead, Lev. I know you want to jump in here.
No. I was saying that's incredible work that Ellie that we were talking about yesterday. Please continue. I'm fascinated by because just thinking about taking a look at that letter and watching the names and the timing. The one thing that really, and I will just say this before we continue this, because we have about a little over 2,000 people here. One of the things we're doing, folks, is we're trying to get accountability here. All of this work that Ellie, that Kate, that Zev, that we all do here, we're trying to get accountability. We have a petition out there. For those of you that don't know, put it out there. Ellie's put it out there. Zev has put it out there. Kate, I've been putting it out there. It's a petition. It's very simple. It costs no money. It just takes a name, but it's to get right now, while we're waiting for more Epstein results. Just think about what Ellie just said right now. Steve Bannon was in constant contact with Epstein right prior to his arrest. They were doing a documentary together. I can't understand, but someone needs to explain explain to me how Steve Bannon is not being subpoenaed, is not being pushed, is not being questioned. What else do
Yeah.
we need to wait for? Michael Wolff. Michael Wolff has come on plenty of time. Not only has he written books about Epstein, but he's been on interviews talking about how he has hundreds of videos and pictures of, Donald Trump sitting there with a stain on his, pants with little and young girls, pointing and laughing and stuff like that. We need to subpoena him,
Right.
release, so Michael
Yeah.
Cohen, folks. Ellie's subscriber found it. I mean, that was just like finding a needle in a haystack. The guy screaming the loudest to release the files. It says there in black and white, my client, Michael Cohen, has information about Donald Trump and Epstein. This is simple
Yep.
stuff, and there's a lot more. So, yes, do the Clintons have to go? Absolutely. Everybody that has been involved with Epstein needs to get subpoenaed. So, folks, if you can, please share that petition, sign it right now. Make sure we get the names because we need accountability. The only way we're going to get accountability is if we show them that our voices matter and that we want, this is what we want. Don't wait till everything else because you know what? I don't believe we're going to get everything else. I believe right now there's major scrubbing going on. I believe that there's, like, for instance, when it comes to Michael Cohen, there, if you take a look at the chain of events that transpired right after Ellie ousted him with that fine that he was in the Epstein files, the next thing he knows, he writes a letter saying that Tish James and Alvin Bragg all of a sudden coerced him. Next thing you know, Donald Trump, right-wing media is all over that. And the next thing you know, Pam Bondi comes out, writes a letter saying, we're not going to give you anything else from the Epstein files. Here we are, So, and my sources are telling me that there's another proffer there that came
Yes.
from Cohen saying that more information about that Jane Doe case, which we all believe is the Katie Johnson case, and we're going to do everything we can prove it. So, folks, we're going to get back into it. But right now, while you're watching, go to the petition, sign it. Everybody, that we have 2,000 people, we should get at least 2,000 signatures right now. In the meantime, let's continue. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a good summary of where we're at.
I
Go
just
ahead,
want to
Kate.
throw in one
Yeah.
thing I had found. I don't know, I wrote about it a few weeks ago, but there was originally a prosecutor. Her name was Dahlia Weiss. And this was May 2006. She recused herself because Epstein had hired, I think it was like her husband's firm or something. It wasn't her husband that he hired, but it was his firm. So she had to recuse herself. But then I found later on, after she had recused herself, I had found like messages. And this was when they released the files from, I think it was the police department in Florida, in Palm Beach, where they had originally done this. And so this particular message was from her, the prosecutor who had recused herself, to that office, the legal office that was representing Epstein. So not even, prosecution or anything. It was his
Kirkland Ellis.
team. And it was, yes, I think Barry Kushner, something like that. This was a message to him from her saying, heads up on a call you'll be expecting or receiving. So like she was clearly working on things, like she was giving information, and the fact that this is in the case file, I mean, it's not like she was just telling them about some random case, like it's clearly related to this. So what I am trying to figure out is if she supposedly had recused herself, but was still continuing to coordinate on the case in this way, does that impact it?
It could be. I mean, the entire Dream Team was worth millions of dollars. They had this extraordinary team: Ken Starr, Dershowitz, Lefkowitz. These were big names for what was a small crime, really. When you think about it, he was procuring a prostitute in Florida. Why all this effort to bury the story? And there are two things that are important, Ellie, that's just interesting in terms of context, in terms of that plea deal. He agrees to a non-prosecution agreement in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's early on. And then he doesn't plead guilty until 2008, sometime in 2008, and in June 2008, if I'm not mistaken. So what's going on in that time is they've agreed to a non-prosecution agreement, and they basically are hoping the whole thing is shut down. And then they were going to try whittle away. This dream team was going to try water down his non-prosecution agreements until there was basically nothing left of it. There was not going to be a plea deal at all. He wasn't going to plead guilty. Marie Villafana, who I have a lot of time for, just in terms of reading her about her story, she was smart enough to tell them that if they don't get their, asses, if you will, not in those words, in front of a court, in front of a judge, and plead guilty, they were going to continue with this investigation that she had launched, which was a financial investigation. And so the financial investigation really worried Jeffrey Epstein, I think a lot more than the other investigation. And he sort of hints at that in an email he sends to the Bear Stearns CEO in November 2007, where he's saying, heads up, I'm going to have to plead guilty essentially to this crime because this prosecutor keeps going after the financial crimes. And one of the things that she did, and all of this attention may have come at this time, is she calls Wexner. She calls Leslie Wexner, and she asks him about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, financial relationship. And that may have triggered a lot of this frenzy that we see around May 19, 2008, where you've got Epstein penning this letter that you've discovered. It's a really important letter. And also I'll just go through some of these others that are and I'd love to hear your thoughts as you go through them. These are, random here, but same day, this is a letter from Sloman, who is in Lefkowitz's office, discussing to Mr. Lefkowitz here, I'm in receipt of your email dated May 19th, so this is the same day, to the United States Attorney. And he says that any issues that happen here will go through Villafana and her supervisor, Karen Atkinson. That's a new name to me as well. So he does, I can barely read this. Sorry, I'm half blind. But essentially he says, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit and make it easier. Sure, that's make it easy for me. Okay, well, I'll just lean in here. I'll do a zoom in. Let me try that. That's easier. So he's saying Villafana and her supervisor, Karen Atkinson, so he does not intend to respond to your email or calls. This is this is Acosta, I believe, is not going to return your calls. To address USA, Villafana's and her supervisor, advise him otherwise. Sorry, I'm having a hard time. Furthermore, you make reference to your July 8th deadline. Respectfully, the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida has never agreed to any such deadline. Should you decide to provide the STAFL with additional information, please do so through Villafana, and in her absence, Atkinson. This is them essentially shutting down an attempt to go over Villafana's head, and all the complaints that they'd put on against Villafana. And they were basically saying in this email, you've got to stick to what Villafana is saying, because she's the one responsible for this interaction. So to think that that's all happening at the same time as you get that one email, and what they're responding to is Ken Starr. Ken Starr's email is, and you can tell us more about this one, I think, while I try to find it here. I think this is the one. This is the later one. This is May 27th, the additional email they sent there. This is the original one from Ken Starr to Mark.
Same day, right?
Yeah, same day, May 19, 2008. It seems remarkable that these things were all happening at the same time. And in this email, he talks a lot about how Villafana has been, crooked and the case is not justified, and he's appealing to the office of the Deputy Attorney General to intervene in this case and drop the case. So there's a huge frenzy going on. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about this email.
Something that I thought was very interesting is they're talking about this guy named David Weinstein, who's a lawyer, and they're saying David Weinstein leaked all the information about the case to the New York Times to Landon Thomas, who was like a financial writer. Landon Thomas is somebody who was very close with Jeffrey Epstein. If you go through, I think it was the November 12th batch that we got, that was almost all emails. And there's a huge, and I don't remember if I posted them or not. I think I did. But there's a huge batch of Landon Thomas emails. And I don't know if Epstein liked him as much as he liked Epstein, but he clearly was very, very interested in Epstein. He wrote to him all the time. They were very connected. And so the idea of this lawyer coming to that specific writer, well, Landon Thomas immediately turned tail and went to Epstein and told on David Weinstein and said, somebody's trying to ruin your life. And I just thought that was very, very interesting that it was that specific writer, because he's of all the people at the New York Times, he was the journalist who was the closest with Epstein.
And a business writer. Go ahead, Lev.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, quick question to all three of you. Gerald Lefcourt, that was Epstein's lawyer?
One of the lawyers, yeah, certainly part of the dream team.
Have you guys ever spoke to him?
I've never spoken to him, no. I've certainly read a lot about him.
You know how crazy this world works? He was my co-defendant's lawyer. I just realized that, and I have
it's not that crazy.
Look us up. Look us up.
So I mean, it's interesting, but I'm gonna reach out to him, and we need to get him on here. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, who wants to shot? Ellie, you want to talk to him? Who wants?
Yeah, put Ellie on it.
Ellie, I'm gonna.
Yeah, do it.
Not what I want to ask him.
Yeah,
the Lefkout's really interesting.
Tell me more about Lefkout, because this is really because I have a really. I don't want to reveal the total, but I have a tremendously good source and relationship with that talk to me.
Well, for one thing, he was Kirkland Ellis, right? So everyone in Kirkland Ellis is somehow involved with this network. You got Jay Lefkowitz, you got Acosta, by the way, who landed up working at Kirkland Ellis after he left the employment of the U.S. government. Jay Lefkowitz was there, obviously, as the attorney to Jeffrey Epstein. So was Bill Barr, by the way. So that whole very, very powerful legal entity, Kirkland Ellis,
lots of questions.
Has is a hub of activity around that, and a lot of the people.
You don't happen to know Bill Barr, do you? We'd really like to talk to Bill Barr.
That would be helpful.
Bill Barr. Oh, I know him very well. This was where the shirt came from. This is where the shirt came from, because I mean, this is what I said when I remember on Rachel Maddow in 2020 when I said Bill Barr was in the loop. Everybody looked at me and said, "This guy is an idiot." They said he doesn't know what he's talking about. Now everybody understands who Bill Barr is, and to what degrees Bill Barr has gone and is still going to and still hiding. No, but this is extremely interesting information that you got that we're gonna follow up on literally today. I'm gonna, as soon as we get off this, I'm gonna start making some phone calls. Because first of all, from what I'm going to tell you, from Gerald Lefkowitz is not, I don't think, the same Gerald Lefkowitz that maybe we're talking about.
Maybe it's different. This is Jeff Lefkowitz.
No. Is it? I thought I saw Gerald Lefcourt.
Maybe it's. Let me double check that.
Take a look. I think it's the same Gerald Lefcourt. He also did a famous case with in Chicago, I think, with the 8. Hold on a second.
Let me pull this back.
Because he was a fan. Yeah. He was Abby Hoffman's activist for the Black Panthers. That's the same one. Gerald Bernard Lefkowitz, clients including registered sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, the Black Panthers, speaker. He represented. Remember the Black Panthers and Abby Hoffman. The Black Panthers in the 8 that's where he became famous from. No, this is Gerald. I know Gerald very well.
So what's interesting about these people and this particular date is they were trying desperately to do two things. They were trying to get the U.S. Attorney's General Office in Florida was trying to get him to actually go in front of a judge and say he's guilty. And they were trying to, the network itself, and Jeffrey Epstein was trying to get them off the scent of the financial crimes. And because that's the investigation they really wanted killed. There's a lot in the non-prosecution agreement. They agree that if he pleads guilty, they'll drop both the financial crimes investigation, the money laundering investigation that opened, and the sex crimes investigation. And so he had to do it. Everyone always wonders how come he's so powerful and had to plead guilty. Marie Villafana would refuse to let him off the hook during this whole thing. She kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And all of this was happening at exactly the same time as this crash was happening, as Bear Stearns was collapsing. So had they come any closer to him, they would have identified the crime in progress. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have one more question. I have because this is fascinating. You guys are putting me on some very interesting
I
tracks
love it
here.
when Lev gets interested.
Very fascinating. This is you have no idea how
We're gonna get
fascinating
2
this is.
a.m. text messages.
Yeah.
Oh, you better believe it. We are on this. We are on this. Tell me. So this is a time frame. So when this is going on, this is what 2008, correct?
Yeah. 2008.
Okay. When did
June.
Michael Cohen come into Donald Trump's
2007.
orbit?
Around
So
2000.
Michael
Definitely.
Cohen is okay. So Michael Cohen is in his orbit when in Trump's orbit when this is going on with Epstein right now.
Yeah,
correct?
and this happens just before the sale of Maison Les Amitiés. So you got which we
Yep.
know Cohen was
And
involved in. So it's definitely was around at that time.
and the other interesting part that you mentioned the sale of his own, because I remember when we were doing the live when he exploded on you, Zev, you also asked. There was an interesting thing he said that you confronted him, and then you confirmed, and you said that it was false. But he was very adamant by saying that the and I forgot the oligarch's name that bought the house.
Rob, I don't say great.
Rubavyov,
I don't know how you say it correctly.
Rubavyov, yeah. Rubavyov. So he said that his daughter then ended up living in the house.
Not true.
And that's not true, correct?
It's
that's
not
another
true.
lie. And he was adamant about that. I remember he was very adamant trying to tell you that he knows for a fact that she lived there.
No. Not in anything I've seen. I've looked at this a million ways, and I have not seen any evidence that anyone. I don't even think he went to see it. Maybe once he went to see it. I don't think that property was ever intended for use by him. It was a vehicle, And
he sold it a month. He sold it a month after the plea agreement.
Right, and that's so interesting, right? You've got the financial
For
crime happening.
A lot of money.
Then you got $95 million. Donald Trump cleared $55 million of that in the middle of a crash.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good. It's pretty good if you're, Donald Trump. But also, Donald Trump didn't pay a cent for anything. He loaned the money from Deutsche Bank with zero down. They just gave him the money. So why did they give him this great deal to buy a house, which he then turns around and sells years later for even more money? It's just so strange that this is a guy that no one would loan money to. Michael Cohen would know the answer to a lot of these questions, actually.
So
go ahead.
I'm sorry. The topic of Michael Cohen was I was just going to add for Russian oligarchs, Columbus Nova had paid Michael Cohen, I think in 2017, it was like $500,000 at least that we know of. And then Columbus Nova had lied about being part of, I think it was Renova Group or something related to one of the Russian oligarchs.
Yeah, it was run by Intrata. Andrew Intrata was Vexelberg's nephew or cousin, I think.
Vexelberg, yeah. So Vexelberg, just so everybody remembers, Vexelberg was the guy who was paying Manafort, Putin's guy. Just continue. I just want to give everybody
the same guy that was connected to Ehud Barak and some organization connected to Scott Bessent, and the same guy who was paying Michael Cohen $500,000 just before, for being a consultant.
That Ergo company that Barack owns, one thing that I had found in his emails indicates that company was selling intelligence. That was the point of it. And so that's what I'm kind of putting together right now. I just kind of found this. And so from what it looks like, I mean, especially with Soros Group and Bessent and all of that, I mean, he specifically signed this contract with him and asked him to transfer the payments to the Ergo company. And from what I can find, that Ergo company, the services that they provided were, I don't know where they're gathering the information, but it is technically not an American company. So then they can sell it back to whoever, wherever.
It sounded like a front.
Fourth Amendment workaround kind of thing too. So there's elements there, but that goes back to that Jeffrey Epstein comment about how George Soros worked very specifically to avoid having to register as a foreign agent by using his
media company, using the media.
Yes.
I'll leave you with one last thing, Kev, because we have to run off. But it is interesting that Ghislaine Maxwell, in her, this according to the Daily Beast today, says that 29 people have already agreed to some sort of a deal, and this is all part of the U.S. Virgin Islands agreement. That they're not being exposed because they've already come up with some sort of deal through the US VI. I haven't read into that story much more, but have any of you read about this? That there's a new development today about this?
Well, Waj and I did a live immediately last night when we read it. I'm very pessimistic about the idea of her coming forward and naming 29 people. She's supposed to she's supposed to be deposed on the 9th, I think, February 9th. I don't know if we'll ever get to hear what she says. My assumption, so she's supposed to say 4 co-conspirators and 25 men who settled basically already. My question is who they settled with. That will be interesting if we get to find that out. The co-conspirators, I can almost guarantee, are going to be the 4 assistants who were given immunity. That would be my guess. She'd name them in a heartbeat because she didn't really like any of them. The 25, I feel like I was telling Kate this earlier. I feel like she's doing a Hail Mary. The 25 people she's going to name, if she names them, will be people that benefit Donald Trump. She is vying for that pardon so hard right now. And so the only way she's going to come forward and name names is if it benefits him in some way. And it's the people who, didn't vote for him, didn't support him, he didn't like, he was up against, he was competitive with. It'll be all those people that she names.
Interesting. If she names anybody. I mean, I think that
if she names anybody.
The reason they've paid their settlements or done is because probably they don't want to be named. They'll probably get away with not being named. You guys do extraordinary work. I just want to give you an opportunity to tell everyone what you do and explain to everyone why they should support your particular Substacks, because every single one of us works as independent, and we collaborate on these extraordinary stories, bringing in whatever expertise we can to the fore. And it's really important that everyone here gets supported by all the viewers on the show. So I'll start with Kate, because you're newest to us all. Tell everyone about what you're doing on Kate Justice and your focus right now.
Well, one of the things that I am really trying to work on is trying to find negligence, really. So obviously I'm combing through the documents, I'm writing about everything I find. I love having these discussions, but at the end of the day, we're trying to get justice for victims and, anything else that we can find that we can prove. And so one of the ways, one of the Epstein victims I had just asked directly, what is a good outcome for you? And, she had said, it's going to be different for everybody, but in her situation, just being able to prove the negligence of the government. I think we have more than enough proof at this point, but if there's anything else that I can find and bring to them that can help that in any way. And then obviously this ridiculous non-prosecution agreement has got to be dealt with. That has to go. There is just, we have to at the very least know the name, at the very least.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment.
That's great stuff. Kate Justice, subscribe to her, become a paid subscriber. Ellie, you've been doing extraordinary work. I sing your praises a lot, so I'm not going to do it again right now, but tell everybody how they can find you and why this work is so important right now, this particular find around this new letter that you've identified as being of Epstein's handwriting, or at least typing.
Yeah, I think it's important because I think something that I've always been looking for and something that I've talked about a lot, similar to what you're saying, Kate, is receipts. We have the evidence. We know what people did. We have the witness testimony. We have millions of documents, right? Potentially millions of documents, but it's these really significant concrete receipts that prove a point that somebody made a long time ago. You think of Maria Farmer's FBI report that was supposedly didn't exist for 30 years, but all of a sudden here we have it. We think of pictures of the surveillance rooms in Epstein's house that they swore up and down didn't exist, and Virginia Giuffre wrote about in her book. There are receipts for the women who are telling the truth that we can show and we can prove, but we have to find them. And so with this document that was in the files, with this letter, this can potentially be a really, really big receipt. If we can prove that it got sent to someone and that it changed policy, it changed the plea agreement, that is a huge receipt, because none of the women in this case were notified before he pled to that agreement. Like they would not, none of them would have been okay with it. And they were not told until after he had already pled, which was terrifying to them because they didn't even know that he was out of jail 12 hours a day. And that was very traumatic for a lot of them.
As part of the plea
and so
deal, he was,
like,
that's, you know, he was
part of the plea
it's
deal.
kind of shocking that
Which Alex Acosta claims he didn't even know that was part of the plea deal. He claims he found that out afterward, which...
Well, Alex Acosta also says that he didn't know about the financial crimes investigation, which would have meant he was, you know, incompetent, basically, because it was happening under his office.
Yes.
So,
what are you even doing here?
he perjured himself for sure in front of the committee.
And I would love to prove that. If we can prove that, amazing. Like these people need to be held to account. So I'm like all of us, I feel like we're kind of a late night club. I feel like we're all texting each other at odd hours,
Yes,
which is kind of
very
fun. More fun to do with this with people. Yeah, you can find me just under my name, Ellie Leonard, on Substack, or Red Pencil Script on any other social media platform.
Thanks, Ellie. You do amazing work and keep doing it. Lev Parnas, the great Lev Parnas, I say always, because it takes a lot of courage to you know, open up about your life and also expose the network. Tell everyone why they should be signing your petition and what you're working on behind the scenes to make sure the Congress is staying focused on the Epstein files.
Yeah, well, first, before we go to that, I want to just say that you guys are incredible. This is true independent journalism. What it's about. This is what Substack's about. And folks, if you were to sign up to a cable network to get some bullshit analyzation from CNN and MSNBC, it would cost you more money than it would cost you to become a paid subscriber to these three individuals. And the information that you would get them on a monthly basis is not like anything else. So I definitely encourage all of you to go out there and subscribe to make sure to each and every one of them, because this is what true independent journalism is. Me, I'm not a journalist. I was one of these folks. I'm not proud of it, but I was part of this mega. I was part of building mega, and now I'm on a journey to take mega apart piece by piece. And with the help of these incredible people around me, like Ellie, like Kate that I met today, like Zev, like my son Aaron, the Midas group, and you know, Dean Blundell, and you know, I can name and on and on and on. That we have built such an incredible, not just a community here, but it's become, you know, a movement. We really have become the resistance. Our voices are being heard. So, you know, the one thing I will ask of you, besides obviously, listen, paid subscribers, you know, one thing you all know about me, I don't sugarcoat it. I don't play games. I tell you the way it is. Nobody here has corporate sponsors. Nobody here has oligarchs or big money donors that are sponsoring our platforms. We work off of you. And if you appreciate it and if you like what we do, and again, no pressure, because this is not for everybody. We understand those people that can, and that's why we try to have no paywalls and stuff like that, because it's important to get you the information. But if you can, become a paid subscriber, because it really goes a long way to making sure that our information goes through these algorithms and also, you know, allows us to keep doing what we're doing, full stop, you know. But the most important thing for today that I'm going to ask you guys is two things, and it's not about me, it's about the survivors, and that's to sign that petition. That petition is very important because just like Kate said, just like Ellie said, just like Zev said, we have more than enough information right now. We have more than enough people right now that we could start subpoenaing, we could start questioning, we could start deposing, and that will lead us down the train. That's great investigative work. We don't need to wait until, you know, if and when that's going to drop, because who knows if one of these guys, what happens if Steve Bannon disappears tomorrow, or Michael Cohen leaves the country, or you have these people here, you know, subpoena him. That's why we have that petition out there. The other thing I'm going to ask you, again, not for me, not for anybody here, but it's for the people of Ukraine. They are suffering right now. They're going through a lot of incredible pain because, again, Donald Trump's way of looking at things and doing things with the Stephen Witkoff, it all ties together. The Russians are tied into the Epstein files. So if you can, we have a GoFundMe set up for Ukraine where miracles are happening every day. If you can, also contribute to that. But those are two things I will ask you today, besides subscribing to these wonderful people.
But I'll also say that everyone should subscribe to Lev Parnas and become a paid subscriber because he does extraordinary work, and it is a phenomenal amount of work, and also just a outreach to people that that he knows that, we as journalists may not be as connected to, but he has connections in ways that we don't, but also an insider knowledge. And, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of courage. And for that reason alone, we should become paid subscribers to Lev Parnas. We'll leave it tonight at this. I just wanted to congratulate you all on being such amazing journalist, and I will include you too, Lev, because I've worked in networks
I feel like
before.
I'm part of the crew now.
Right?
I'm just amazed by what the community has done and what the community does through each of us in terms of sharing information. Ellie, you've been sourcing things with your crowd. That's remarkable. There's a lot of stuff that's coming to the surface here, and the goal is not to just expose Jeffrey Epstein. The goal is to understand who put Donald Trump in power. This is how Donald Trump got to be the president of the United States. And as he is continuing to whittle away at our rights, as he's continuing to authorize ICE and Border Patrol people to shoot people in the streets of America, the reason we can understand, by understanding exactly who put him in place, is the way we can also stop him from being in place. And that's why this Epstein network, the financial crimes, the human trafficking crimes, they all relate directly to Donald Trump because it is exactly the same network. And that's where we'll leave it tonight on Narrative Live. Thank you for being here. Thank you, guys. And thank you to being at home.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great night. Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.
You too.